Hey, kid, I want you to spill your guts. Tell us everything. Everything.
Everything. Okay, I'll talk. In 3rd grade, I cheated on my history exam. In 4th grade, I stole my Uncle Max's toupee and I glued it on my face when I played Moses in my Hebrew school play. In 5th grade, I knocked my sister Edie down the stairs and I blamed it on the dog.
So I was gonna title this video something like Skeleton Crew hunted me for sport and made my parents watch, or something like that. Something that fits into my title convention and that's sure to get me a lot of clicks. But honestly, I'm just not feeling it today. And that's for one very specific reason. Skeleton Crew is not a good show, but the ways in which it's bad are very frustrating to me. Mainly because for the first several weeks that it was airing, I actually thought it was fine. I mean, it had problems here and there, some that were threatening to be real massive issues if they weren't properly addressed. But for the most part, it was inoffensive, harmless, and just kind of there, which is fine by me. I'd obviously prefer if another Star Wars show besides Andor could actually do something great and reach the heights of even a good 7 out of 10 rating. But if all the shows released under Disney were of the same quality of Skeleton Crew, we'd be in a much better place right now. So the show was nothing special, but it was at least a fun, enjoyable ride that I found cozy, and I was ready to come on here and tell you guys that very thing and do a quick little review for it. I have other projects in the works, and I don't want this video to be too long. But unfortunately, the show just kept going, and those issues I mentioned earlier that threatened to become major problems down the line, well, they did that. And now, I don't believe that I can in good faith call the show fine anymore. It's bad, and that deeply frustrates me. What frustrates me more, though, is how a lot of people responded to me saying it's bad on things like Twitter, because I expect toxicity from Star Wars fans at this point. This is nothing new, but at least with things like Ahsoka or The Acolyte, I understood what I was getting into when I talked about those shows. They were really bad, and there were a lot of people that were going to come out of the woodwork and label me racist, sexist, and everything else under the sun because good faith just isn't a thing anymore. And that's fine. Well, no, it's not fine, but I'd made my peace with that. What surprised me with Skeleton Crew, though, was how many people in my own follower base turned on me here. Like, not just that they disagreed with my take, but a lot of them actively started accusing me of some of the same things Disney Star Wars fans have been hurling at me for years. That I simply hate everything, or that I'm only saying it's bad because I know it'll garner me a lot of attention. When I cannot stress enough that I wanted this video to be about how the show was fine. This isn't the video I wanted to make. So suffice it to say, I'm pretty unhappy with some of you guys. I expected better from you. Like, I'm not saying I don't get my fair share of stupid comments, but at least for the most part, I thought you all understood what it is I'm trying to do here and at least had the decency to assume my intentions were in good faith. To those of you who are what I expected out of you, I appreciate that. But to those who aren't, do better. Anyway, sorry if I'm coming off like a teacher scolding a class of middle schoolers here. Like I said, I'm very frustrated right now, and I wanted to make all this known up front so you can get a better understanding of where my head's at as I write this. The show itself may be bad, but it deserves to be assessed critically and fairly, despite however I might be feeling at the moment, so that's what we're here to do today. And I should say, it's not nearly on the same level as the truly awful stuff we've been subjected to for the last few years, so while it's not as good as I was hoping it would be by the end, I'm not coming at this with any form of contempt or venom. I like the show just fine, and there's a lot here to genuinely appreciate. It's got some solid character work in a lot of places, the child actors are fine, and Jude Law, he's just having a hell of a time chewing up the scenery. I could watch his scenes for hours. There's also this very intentional retro sci-fi aesthetic that they're going for, obviously taking big inspiration from 80s movies like The Goonies and a little bit of E.T., and something that really helps to sell that aesthetic beyond just visually recreating certain aspects of that are set design and costumes and music. There's a lot of synth used in places to really elevate the alien feel in certain scenes in a way that works quite well. When comparing the show to some of the stuff it's paying homage to, it does kind of feel like a watered down imitation, but I will say that the visuals in this show are generally better in most of the stuff you'll find in shit like Kenobi, for whatever the hell that's worth. It's one of the better looking live action Star Wars shows, at least most of the time. There was a lot of controversy around the aesthetic of the main planet, At-Aten, which seeks to recreate this California suburbs vibe in the way the city and neighborhoods are structured, and that really wasn't my cup of tea. I'm not saying you can't try to recreate this type of location in the Star Wars galaxy, but I will say that usually when Star Wars movies and shows are trying to base their settings off real-world locations, they try to deviate a little bit from how it would look on Earth, in a way that I just don't think this show does. Take Dexter's Diner, for example. It's your typical 50s diner on the inside, sure. There's really nothing too distinctive about the interior of this building as compared to something you might see in American Graffiti, be, aside from the robot waitress, obviously. But the outside doesn't betray the industrialized theme of the Coruscant aesthetic. I can still look at the outside of this building and tell that it's supposed to be a diner, but it also looks nothing like one you'd ever find in the real world. In Skeleton Crew, they changed the way the houses look a little bit in terms of roof design and things like that, but not nearly enough to distinguish it from anything you might find in any San Francisco suburb. Take a look at any wide or establishing shot, and you're gonna see what I mean. So like I said, I didn't personally vibe with the execution of this concept, but I was willing to give the show its day in court regardless. But these are all just things that the show did to set the mood and get you excited for the big adventure to come, so let's actually talk about the story now. Skeleton Crew is a show about a bunch of kids who find a spaceship buried in the ground and accidentally launch it into space, finding themselves on an adventure amongst the stars, dodging danger and running from pirates, all while taken under the wing of Jod Nanawood, played by Jude Law. I'm gonna call him Jod for the sake of simplicity, but his character has a lot of different names, to really add to the mystery of his character and showcase just how slimy and untrustworthy he is. One of his many aliases is Crimson Jack, which may have been a deep cut reference to the early Star Wars comics, or maybe John Watts just thought it was a cool sounding pirate name and had no awareness at all of the connection. He's also frequently referred to as Silvo, which I found especially interesting since they seem to be trying to characterize him as a John Silver type, a rugged pirate out for himself who finds himself taking in a precocious young kid, or a group of them in this case, and developing a strong relationship with them over time. I'd argue the show doesn't really do that as well as it probably thinks it does, but there are a few neat little moments of him bonding with main character Wim and butting heads with Fern, the de facto leader of the group who the rest of the kids look to for guidance when they get lost in space. And rounding out the group is SM-33, another cheeky little pirate reference. This is a droid that I don't really understand. So this is where I get into my first criticism, both to do with the plot and with the characterization of 33. 33 came with the ship they took off on, the Onyx Cinder, which used to belong to Captain Renid, the most legendary pirate who ever lived before vanishing mysteriously in search of the lost treasure world of At-Aten. Evidently they got there, but everyone on the ship died in the process and the ship crashed. Now 33 is the only survivor, and when he sees the kids, he classifies them as stowaways and makes to jettison them out the airlock, but Fern steps up and tells him that his captain is dead and that she was the one who killed him. This apparently requires no burden of proof, but it seems we're taking a page out of Mando rules here by saying that apparently makes her his new captain. And just kind of keep track of whose orders he follows at any given time with this information on your mind. He's fiercely loyal to whoever he sees as the captain, except when he's not. Now, the current state here is that after taking off in the ship, they jumped into hyperspace for reasons that I really don't understand, and now they're just kind of sitting in the middle of space. The kids ask 33 if he can get them back to At-Aten, to which he replies,
"Can't say I remember no At-Aten."
There is a lore reason that we'll get to later for why this droid apparently doesn't remember the planet he was literally just on, that his own captain apparently spent some time searching for. But for now, the thing I immediately found interesting about this was that ships have logs, right? They keep a record of the coordinates for the places they visit, and At-Aten would have been the most recent place on that log. I don't really understand why they can't just check that and work backwards to get the kids home. So already it's feeling a bit contrived that this story is even being allowed to happen, but I was willing to go with it. You know, let's see if they cook. So the next thing that happens is they arrive at the pirate port and catch the attention of all the pirates when Wim tries to pay for his meal with a single datary, which are apparently super valuable. They're the same kind of currency Qui-Gon offered Watto back in The Phantom Menace, as far as I can tell.
I have 20,000 Republic Dactaries.
He pronounces it differently, but it's clearly the same word. I have a lot of questions about what exactly a datary is, how much it's worth, and why it's seemingly worth so much, but we're gonna save that for a bit later, because I have more to say about contrivances. The pirates capture the kids and throw them in the brig, but I guess they didn't decide to have anyone search them, because the kids managed to hold on to all their datary chips, despite, again, those being established as super valuable, and some of the pirates even suggesting earlier that they check to see if they have any more on them.
See if they got more on them.
This will be important because there are several points later where they need to pay for stuff in order to progress in their journey, and if the pirates had taken all their money, then they wouldn't be able to do that. But anyway, they're thrown into a cell with Jod, who I should mention we were initially introduced to in the show's opening scene as the captain of the pirate crew currently holding them prisoner. He led them on a pirate raid, but the vault was completely empty and the pirates mutinied against him. I'm not sure how long after that this is supposed to be, but apparently he's awaiting a trial, and I don't understand why they don't just give him one already and then execute him. We see what a pirate trial looks like later on, and it's not like it's some lengthy process that requires deliberation and discovery or anything like that. There's not like a courtroom or pirate lawyers. Basically, the new Captain Brutus reads out what the charges are. He gets about 3 minutes to argue why they shouldn't kill him, and if they don't like what they hear, they throw him out the airlock. So I don't know why they waited to do that, but it's good for our characters that they did, because they pull a Wenwu from Shang-Chi and put the kids in the same cell as him, and he's able to use the Force to levitate the keys over so he can unlock the door. It kind of makes you wonder why he spent any time in the cell when he could... Okay. He tells the kids there was no point in escaping the brig if he didn't have a ship to get away on, but it's not like he knew these kids were coming and that they'd have a ship he could use. Surely he wasn't just planning to stay there and do nothing, right? Well, in any case, they do manage to get back to the ship, but then the kids remember that 33 was shot down by the pirates, and they tell Jod they aren't leaving without him. I'd like to remind you guys that this is a band of children with absolutely no combat experience of any kind or weaponry. Jod does not have to do what they say. He needs the kids to help him get to Ad-Atten so he can find the treasure, but it's not like they just weren't gonna cooperate with him, right? Like, they want to get home. Going back for 33 runs the very unnecessary risk of getting him captured by people who want him dead, which is almost what happens. I'm actually not really sure why it didn't. He has 33 on this really heavy cart, and it's clearly taking him some effort to push it when one of the pirates calls the guards on him. No idea how he's gonna get out of this scrape with 33 in tow, but I guess it doesn't matter because the show has absolutely no interest in showing that to us. It just cuts to the next scene and suddenly he's commandeered a transport back to the ship with pirates on his tail and 33 unconscious in the back seat. They literally didn't even try with this one. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of you out there right now telling me I hate fun, but this is like the third major contrivance to do with this droid, and we're only 3 episodes in so far. There's still more to go over. Something that I want you guys to pay extra attention to as we go is who 33 decides to listen to at any given moment. Like, sometimes no one is allowed to give him orders except whoever he views as the captain, and sometimes Jude Law can just tell him what to do. Like, there are scenes where Jod tries to give him orders and he looks to Fern for permission, and then other times, sometimes even in the same scene, where Jod can just tell him to do something and he'll do it.
Refill that chamber with acid.
I mean, that was a pretty significant order there. You don't want to verify that with your captain before he... Okay. In episode 4, Fern tells him to keep Jod restrained to the ship while they go to check out the planet they're on, and then later they just decide to go out for a little stroll together. Guess that order didn't really matter then, did it? Well, in the same episode, he straight up tries to kill Fern and the other kids because he suddenly remembers that he's supposed to dispose of anyone who asks questions about Ad-Atten. And apparently, even though she's his captain, her literally ordering him to stop doesn't seem to matter all that much to him. This is apparently according to his previous captain's orders, so does the will of the previous captain supersede that of the current one, or is there some kind of override about this order specifically that makes it so that nothing Fern says will stop him from completing his task? I would go for option 2 out of good faith, were it not for the fact that they start the next episode by him waking up, the kids asking him not to kill them, and him obeying. He just goes right back to doing what they say. Come on, buddy, I need some kind of consistency here. So then Jod invokes the right to challenge Fern for captaincy, and he gets her to yield, so now he's the captain, and 33 has to do what he says, right? Well, a couple episodes later, Jod needs to reclaim the Onyx Cinder, because it's the only ship they have that can get past the barrier protecting Ad-Atten, and so he does just that.
I claim this ship. I claim the Onyx Cinder.
But then Fern is like, I call unclaimsies, and Jod is like, you can't do that. Obviously, that's not how that works. But apparently, that is how that works, because 33 decides to go with that as a reason to punch Jod and throw him off the ship. We have a droid who decides on a whim who he does and doesn't want to follow at any given moment, who sometimes follows his programming, except when he doesn't, and all of that is entirely dictated by whatever the script demands at any point. He is a literal Deus Ex Machina who enforces far too many plot contrivances for me to simply ignore, just because he's got a fun pirate voice and a nice design. I know a lot of people like this character, but honestly, as the show went on, I just got more and more sick of him. But okay, let's zoom out for a second here and try and give this review some kind of structure, because I recognize it's been a bit all over the place. All I've done so far is loosely go through the plot and explain some of the things that happen and where I think it falters when trying to connect from A to B. There are a lot of contrivances here. I've barely even even scratch the surface. And if it was just 2 or 3 here and there, I wouldn't really be mentioning it, but it's basically like the entire story is connected with string and chewing gum. It's a very and then type of show. This happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Kinda convenient that someone Jod screwed over in his past just happens to show up on the resort planet right as they get there in search of an old hidden pirate lair. If she hadn't have been there and spotted them when she did, the pirates chasing our main characters never would have gotten alerted to them being on Lanupa, and then the rest of the story plays out way differently. There's a laundry list of these, and I really could go on, but I think that's missing the point here. Because like I said at the beginning of this video, these were all problems that I spotted as I was watching the show, and I still considered it fine for the most part. There's still enough good sprinkled in throughout that I kind of touched on a bit ago that I think mostly salvages this into being an okay, easy time. Nothing great or even particularly good, but serviceable. Something you can put on while the little ones come to visit, and the whole family will probably have a good time. But I think what makes this a bad show falls into a few of the larger issues that started to pop up in the first few episodes, but which really compounded by the finale. I've already hinted at what these things are, so let's just come out and say it. The currency system in this universe no longer makes any sense, and the very concept of a world like At-Aten just up and disappearing from the wider galaxy is a really hard pitch to sell given its status. We find out eventually that At-Aten is an old Republic mint. It's where they used to print money for the Republic. And it's never made exactly clear when At-Aten disappeared or how it even managed to do that, but the show gives us a general time frame that it's been hundreds of years.
At-Aten's been hidden for hundreds of years.
But seeing as, galactic history spans for a little longer than that, you'd think if At-Aten is something that historically existed as a matter of record, then it couldn't simply stop existing, right? This is kind of the same problem as Rey thinking Luke Skywalker was a myth. How does something as prominent as a Republic mint fall into the status of nothing more than a pirate bedtime story? When the children interact with other characters and tell them they're from At-Aten, they assume they're lying because apparently At-Aten is widely accepted to not be real. And that just doesn't make sense to me. And, well, it seems like the Republic remained in contact with them all the way up into the rise of the Empire.
You see, the last message from the Republic stated that all Jedi were traitors. So, which are you lying about? Being an emissary or a Jedi?
More on that in a moment. So maybe it's a matter of the government itself erased all records of the planet existing? I don't even really believe that something like that would be possible, right? Like, the coordinates for the location of this place would be stored in archives all over the galaxy. Not all of them are under Republic jurisdiction. And even if they somehow could scrub the coordinates from every place in the galaxy that keeps a record of planetary locations and star maps, that wouldn't suddenly make it so that everyone believes At-Aten is a myth. People would think, oh, the government is trying to hide the location of a very real planet that exists and that we've known exists for thousands of years. What the hell's going on there? It would take some serious propaganda to try to pretend like a historically documented world just isn't real and never was. And I just know someone is going to try to compare this to the erasure of Kamino, but there are some serious differences between the two situations. First of all, Kamino was only ever erased from the Jedi archives. If Obi-Wan had gone to any public library, I'm sure he would have found it without much difficulty. But it served its purpose of keeping any of the Jedi from accidentally happening upon information about it before it was time to unveil the clone army. And secondly, Kamino wasn't a world with much galactic importance in the same way At-Aten would be, given that it's what produces money for all of Republic's space. Kamino became relevant because of the clone army, but if no one knows that exists yet, who's gonna think to look? So the two cases aren't comparable because Kamino was never really hidden, and no one was actively searching for it until the assassination plot against Padme started. At-Aten, on the other hand, is the stuff of centuries-old legend that every pirate in the universe would love to learn the location of. But going back to that other thing about the Republic apparently being aware of the existence of At-Aten and how to get a hold of them, in the last episode we're introduced to the Supervisor, who throughout the show has been kind of built up as this ominous Big Brother type figure looming over the society of At-Aten. It turns out to be a giant robot who informs us that the Republic had been regularly sending emissaries to do business with them and, I assume, take shipments of credits off-world to disperse into the galactic economy. He says in the clip I played for you a minute ago that the last message they received about the goings-on of the galaxy told them about the Jedi having been branded as traitors, which firmly puts that on a timeline for us. They were definitively in contact with the Republic until sometime after Order 66. You might try to argue that that clip doesn't necessarily mean the Republic were sending its emissaries to At-Aten all that time. Maybe they sent holo messages or something, or At-Aten simply kept up with the the news, but it's a major plot point in this finale that the planet has a barrier around itself that prohibits contact with the outside world, which means this message could only have been delivered to the supervisor in person by an emissary. Plus, it'd be a little weird if At-Aten didn't receive anyone in decades, if not centuries, but weren't at all alarmed at the idea of one showing up when Jod did. They were suspicious of him, yes, but only because he'd claimed to be a Jedi who they understood to be traitors. It seemed like otherwise they would have completely trusted that he was who he said he was. And finally, I don't buy the whole they keep up with the news thing, because then that would mean that they know about the rise and fall of the Empire, and about the fact that the Jedi are once again in good standing with the Republic, which means this gotcha against Jod wouldn't make any sense. It could only have been an emissary who told them about the Jedi being traitors, and if you remember your timeline of events correctly, you should be able to guess which government said emissary was representing when that happened. The long and short of this is, the Republic must have known about At-Aten up until its demise, and then the Empire would have also known about them by simply inheriting the government. Why didn't the Empire continue using the planet for its intended purpose of printing currency? Why didn't At-Aten switch over to Imperial credits? And why does it seem like the New Republic don't know they exist if they inherited the government and all of its records from the Empire? Just saying all of this now, I worry a lot of you guys are getting confused here, because none of this really makes any sense, does it? I'm just relaying the information as it's presented by the show, and then trying to sift through it all to see if I can find an answer to the questions that all this raises. But it really does feel like no matter which way you look at it, it's just confusing. And that's weird, right? Like, this is supposed to be a kid's show. I mean, people defend all Star Wars shows as being for kids when you try to criticize them, but it feels like it's especially meant to be the case with Skeleton Crew. It's the only Star Wars thing that primarily has a cast of children. It's going for the same aesthetic as other kids' media from the 80s. You'd think a show like this would be really simple and easy to follow, and that's what a lot of people say it is, but we can't even seem to make sense of the core premise here. See, I have a theory about this show that seems to have been confirmed true with some of the behind-the-scenes stuff we've gotten since the finale dropped. There was an actress lined up to play Jod's Jedi Master in what I assume would have been flashbacks depicting his origin story, and we have confirmation that that scene did get filmed, but obviously it never made it into the final product. And this tells me that there's at least some version of the finale out there that would have looked different from the one we got, though to what degree I'm not really sure. It does line up though, because a lot of people, myself included, came away from that finale with the sense that it just kind of ended. It happened pretty abruptly and without much in the way of resolution. Like, yeah, the evil pirates are defeated by a last-minute save from the New Republic, which we're gonna get to later, but the final scene of the show is just the pirate ship going down and Republic forces landing on the planet. We don't get any aftermath scenes showing the kids post-adventure with all their experiences they had and lessons they learned. We don't see scenes of the Republic actually establishing a presence on At-Aten and exploring what they intend to do with it now that they know it exists. We don't even see what happens to Jod. He just watches from the tower as the ship goes down, and then that's the last time we see him. I'm not sure what happened to him. And my theory is that once upon a time, there was a very different version of how this story ends that, for whatever reason, got scrapped. Probably for something more safe and family-friendly, if I had to guess. And if this is true, it would explain a lot of weird inconsistencies regarding some of the stuff I brought up about At-Aten. From the very beginning of the show, we're introduced to the society on this planet in a kind of eerie way. As previously established, it's this overly sanitized suburban city where nothing ever seems to happen, but with some sinister undertones. There's security droids all around that are seemingly there to protect the citizens, but are mainly used to enforce restrictions on the places they go and the things that they do. You definitely get the impression that if a character steps even 1 foot out of bounds, there will be serious consequences. The children are also up for an assessment to determine their entire career path, even though they're in like 7th grade. We're taught that this assessment is extremely important in determining your future here in service of what the authorities refer to as the Great Work. It doesn't seem like anyone even knows exactly what this Great Work is, and it's all in service to this mysterious supervisor that only a few select people are even allowed to meet. All of that is without mentioning the barriers surrounding this planet that not only keeps it hidden from the rest of the galaxy, but also prohibits anyone on the planet from leaving or making contact with the outside world, all while giving them very rudimentary lessons about what the larger galaxy is even like and its history.
In school we learned about Coruscant and Alderaan.
Alderaan? Missed the war, did you?
What war?
Fascinating.
It seemed pretty clear to me that something nefarious was going on here. Clearly this supervisor, if such a person even exists, is up to no good and is using these unwitting citizens to do its bidding in the service of something really shady. That would explain why they don't seem to know what the great work is, or why at the very least the children aren't allowed to know about what it is they're really doing.
You weren't supposed to find out about any of this until you graduate.
And it explains why they want to stay hidden from the rest of the galaxy, and why its citizens aren't allowed to even know what's really going on out there. And I think whatever the original ending of this show was, all of that was going to factor into the overall story here. But for some reason, they decided against it, and now there's just shit that doesn't make any sense. So apparently AT-ATN really is just a money printing machine for the government. There's no ulterior motive there. The supervisor seems to actually believe they're affiliated with the Republic, and apparently continued to receive emissaries from them up until the rise of the Empire, at which point the Empire stopped affiliating with them for reasons. And also, everyone nowadays seems to just believe the planet is a myth, including actual representatives of the Republic. Did I get all that right? I guess the great work was just, we gotta keep printing money? Why did that need to be kept a secret? So like I said, this is a very confusing show that only even kinda makes sense if you assume it used to have a completely different ending that actually ties into all the things that were being set up. But that's really weird to me, because one of the things most people seem to be praising about it is the fact that it's really simple, and I just don't get it. Am I missing something here, or are people just turning their brains off and not letting themselves think too critically about the show starring literal babies? It's fine if that's what you're doing, but that doesn't mean it makes sense. I still don't really understand how the currency is supposed to work in this galaxy, and why dataries are treated like this extremely rare, valuable currency. Either this is a different type of datary than the ones Qui-Gon had, which would only really make sense if they're from the Old Republic and are therefore an outdated form of currency by the time of the prequels, but if that's the case, I don't really get why they're valuable now, or they are the same type of currency, and I guess Watto just didn't realize how much 20,000 of those suckers were worth. And frankly, there might be perfectly valid explanations for how all this works that my dumbass just isn't smart enough to piece together, but I still find that strange. Because if this is supposed to be a kid's show that you don't have to think too hard about, then why are you introducing shit like the economic value of a specific type of credit and tying that into the main plot of the show? Why are you forcing the kids watching this to either engage with the material or give up out of frustration because it's so complicated even adults can't understand it? Wouldn't it be simpler to just do a straightforward pirates are after a hidden treasure plot like in every pirate story ever? Let's pull a little from Treasure Island here and just say there was some legendary pirate captain who existed hundreds or thousands of years ago who amassed a great fortune and hid all his treasures on the lost planet of AT-ATN. Maybe AT-ATN is some backwater world whose society had never had any galactic relevance or contact with the Republic, and maybe hadn't even mastered space travel or something yet, so there was no way for the rest of the galaxy to even know about it beyond its status as a myth. I don't know. The idea would still need some workshopping, but you do away with a lot of problems on the show by just making it a straightforward pile of treasure on an unimportant, out-of-the-way world. I don't see why everything has to connect to everything. That's another thing your show gets praised for. People are like, there weren't any cameos from named characters, so that must mean it was somehow self-contained and inconsequential, and I'm like, they made the Republic look really fucking stupid, and I'm pretty sure they broke the very concept of currency in this world. And there are other ways that this absolutely ties into the larger world in detrimental ways. Jod's entire backstory is that he was apparently taken in by a Jedi who survived Order 66, but she got killed by the Empire before he could get too far along in his training, which is something that I really don't believe considering some of the stuff he's able to do in this show. It takes some serious proficiency with a lightsaber and mastery over the Force to consistently block blaster fire, especially from multiple directions at a time. But he also mentioned specifically how the Empire forced him to watch as his master died, which implies they had him in their custody and I guess they just let him go. Like I said, he was clearly a lot further along in his training than he's advertising, but even if he wasn't, the Empire wouldn't just let him walk free knowing he has the potential to become a Jedi. They'd either kill him outright or try to brainwash him into becoming an Inquisitor. Also, I thought Mando Season 3 made it pretty clear that the New Republic forces are stretched thin because for some reason they're decommissioning their fleet, and things like pirate attacks on non-Republic member worlds are just not something they can do anything about with the limited resources they have. Carson Teva had to go out of his way to find a band of Mandalorians to get them to save Navarro from Gorian Shard, and that was despite the fact that Navarro at least has some value given it's stationed as the leader of a pirate republic that does trade with all sorts of independent parties. Ahsoka reinforces this by not even letting Hera take the fleet to investigate a very serious possibility regarding the return of Thrawn, supposedly one of the most fearsome and exacting Grand Admirals to ever serve the Empire.
These are unfortunate, but acceptable losses.
But now a bunch of pirates are attacking a planet that nobody even believes exists, and apparently that's good enough for the Republic to send a small fleet to their rescue. This might make sense if it turned out the New Republic actually does know about AT-ATN and how important it is, but then I'm going to start asking questions about why they haven't already established some kind of presence on their planet. I'd cast doubt on the idea that the writers of the show simply didn't know about that storyline in Mando, considering one of the pirates in this conflict was also in those episodes. Honestly, I think the greatest payoff the show gives us is the fact that Vane was first introduced adamantly insisting he get to drink inside of a school, and his story ends with him attacking a bunch of children at a school. Bravo, Vince. Well done. I've said before, and I'll say again, that setting something in this part of the timeline is just not a good idea, because the Mandoverse and the sequel trilogy have extremely broken world building, and you're only hurting your story by trying to attach it to something like that. If you really wanted this to be self-contained, you could easily have done that. It's a pirate story. You could basically just throw that shit anywhere on the timeline, it would work just fine. But as it stands, it just doesn't fit very well with the larger world of Star Wars, and as a story in its own right, it isn't very good. It has somewhat likable characters and a nice tone and atmosphere, but that's about all it has going for it. A few steps above the rest, but still a 4 out of 10. I apologize for the disjointedness of this video, though in my defense, the problems with the show are kind of difficult to explain, and the plot is all over the place. Plus, with my videos on other Disney Star Wars slop, there's a genuinely passionate rage that fuels every word I'm saying that I really just didn't feel this time around. Like I said, I like the show just fine, it just isn't good, and I have to be honest about that. This video was kind of a huge wake-up call for me in terms of whether or not I really should review every new Star Wars show coming out going forward. I've already been questioning that for a while because I hate most of the new stuff and I'm honestly sick of watching it, and if I can be brutally honest here for a second, the only reason I still even make these videos at all is because I know they're popular, and as someone who's trying to do this YouTube thing for a living, I can't afford to just not go for the thing that'll get me the most views. That was my outlook anyway, as of when I forced myself to power through The Acolyte, but honestly, I'm not sure anymore. I can see the writing on the walls as far as whether or not these new shows are even getting that much attention anymore, and I can at least say with Skeleton Crew, that's definitely no longer the case. I'd honestly be amazed if this video does well, considering it doesn't seem like anyone's actually watching this show, and honestly, I kind of think that relieves me, in a sense. If covering new Star Wars shows is no longer a lucrative thing, then what incentive do I have to keep doing it, you know? Maybe I don't have to keep forcing myself to watch bullshit like The Acolyte just to make ends meet. I don't know. In any case, I'm definitely not going to review a show like this anymore. If I don't feel passion for it one way or another, then it's just a chore to do it. And I make these videos because I like doing so if and when that ever ceases to be the case, I highly doubt I'm going to keep making them. Thankfully, there are many videos I want to make that I actually am passionate about, some Star Wars related, some not, and I think my channel is finally at a place where I can afford to do that without worrying that I'm tanking any chance of growing further, so yay for me, I guess. This isn't to say I'm never gonna review any of the new stuff again, I'm just finally at a point where I feel like I can be a bit more selective about which things I spend time and effort on, you know? But I want to end the video here because, like I said, this was supposed to be the quick, easy video that I threw together in a couple of days while I work on other things. Currently, I'm working on a 2-part series reviewing all 6 of the Venomverse movies, with production of part 1 already well underway, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, you know the drill, join the Discord server, become a channel member if you want to give me your sweet, sweet cash money, and Neil, you just be Neil. Okay, bye. I like this holiday special reference, that's pretty cute.